This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A conversation with two key members of the Memphis City Council about the departure of Kreiner Cash and the future of tax rates and tax breaks in the city. Those stories and more coming up on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by Kemp Conrad from the Memphis City Council. Thank you for being here.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Shay Flynn, also of the Memphis City Council. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me again.
And Bill Dries, reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We start in part, we'll get mostly about the looking forward to the budget, taxes, tax rates, some of the real big issues the City Council's in the middle of. But because of the departure, the resignation and negotiated settlement with Kreiner Cash, former or superintendent of the former city schools, I wanted to start there. In part, Shay, because it fits in on some big level with the whole discussion about the state of the city budget. I mean, it was 2008 or so that the city tried to pull funding from the city school system, a lawsuit, changes to the city budget as a result of that, and tax rates and so on. Ultimately, that, although the city began to fund the city schools again, I think that was part, a lot of people would say, part of why the city schools, rejected their charter and forced this whole merger. And so it's a real milestone that Kreiner Cash is leaving at this point. Your thoughts on it?
I think that Dr. Cash, in the political world, kind of saw the writing on the wall. They didn't renew his contract. Aiken still had another year left on his. With the controversy between Pickler and Jones on there, I think he just saw that this could get a lot uglier, and I don't know that he necessarily wanted a part of it. He could get while the getting was good, and I thank him for his service to our community and wish him the best of luck in his next endeavor.
Let me get your perspective, Bill. I mean, the legacy of Kreiner Cash, he came in as a reformer, trying to change a lot of things. He also, a lot of things that a lot of critics of the city school system said needed to be changed. He also, his critics said, well, he was a little imperial and he was a bit arrogant and he rubbed people the wrong way. What do you think his legacy will be?
I think his legacy will be that he probably carried the reform banner in the city school system, whether you agree with those reforms or not, further certainly than his two predecessors in the position, maybe further than anyone we've seen in our lifetime on that. His problem was that he came to believe that he owned the reforms. He was actually just ahead of the same reforms that are being implemented nationwide. And the other part of it was that in the middle of pushing for these reforms in what I think was a very dedicated and intense way, what happened was he didn't know that part of the fabric of those reforms was the city's politics, the city's very emotional and equally intense politics, and that kind of pulled the other way on this one piece of fabric. As he was pushing the reforms, you then saw the move for a consolidated school system.
And Kemp, you had said to me before the show, and maybe a smart man, I don't do education, but I mean, any thoughts on if not Kreiner Cash, the state of the merger and the state of how that's impacted the city budget?
I agree with what Councilman Flynn said and what Bill said. I mean, there's a lot of good things going on with the Gates money, race to the top, paying teachers based more on performance. We're going to start having a real discussion about early childhood and the importance of that in this community now. That's finally starting to think in. I think we need to have a lot of discussion about that and how best to fund it. So I think it's a great opportunity. If we're ever going to be a great city and reach our potential, we talk about so much about the potential of our city. If we're going to reach that potential, we've got to have a great school system. And to me, we really don't need a school system. We need a system of schools. We need different schools that can compete. And if your child is good at math or English or sports, where we need to be much more innovative, I think, and do things differently than we have in the past. And I want to thank Councilman Flynn publicly. He's worked very hard on behalf of Memphis residents, I think, as a part of these settlements. And hopefully we're going to see the community come together around this because whether you live in Millington, or Memphis, this region will rise and fall based on how Memphis does. We're the heart of this region, and for the region to succeed and all those folks to be prosperous, Memphis has to succeed.
Well, we shift to your proposal. As we talk about schools, we talk about early childhood education, we talk about the impact on the budget, the legacy of the city schools being funded, not funded, and now not funded without a lawsuit. You've proposed a sales tax increase. Tell us your proposal. Tell us what you want to do with that money and how you want to change things, Councilman Flynn.
The sales tax, we proposed it, the council proposed it back in August. It was then supplanted by the county commission, and they had some ideas for it. And looking at some of their ideas, they weren't all bad, and some of them were very good. The problem was there were so many moving pieces at that time with school board, one hand was going to raise the money and the other hand was going to spend the money. And that led to some confusion. What we've done is if a municipal-only sales tax passes in Memphis, it raised right now about $47 million. So we're taking $27 million of that and putting it in a trust to be administered by an early childhood commission that will be appointed by the mayor, approved by the council. That's to give people certainty that this is where this money's going to go. Now, for the first year or so, it would only take about $23 million. But the problem is the race for the top money is going to run out in 2014. We know this. And that includes about 30 of the current early pre-kindergarten classes. We're building in funding for that. We'll have the money there, have a group of non-politicians to watchdog the money and do it. And then the question becomes, what do you do with the other 20 million? And again, I think that the important thing is this is a referendum. The people are going to vote on it. You have to give them as much information as you possibly can. So what we're saying is that $20 million will divert the revenue stream that is currently on the property tax and put it on the sales tax. People from outside our community pay it. Our rate will be average for the state, even though it will be at the maximum by state law.
Our sales tax rate.
Where the problem exists is our property tax rate is so out of whack. So we are going to be taking money that is currently raised through property tax and raise it through.
And roughly what the rate right now is around 311, and you're proposing to bring it down to?
We're proposing to reduce it by 20 cents, which in today's dollars would be a 291 rate. But all that is the baseline. Okay. Councilman Conrad has got a lot of ideas for reform on the city government. Those ideas would still be necessary with this plan. All we're doing is saying we've ridden the sales tax somewhat. We've ridden the property tax way beyond the horse being dead. We're completely out of whack with the rest of them, so we need to supplant some of those funds with the sales tax money, and it provides certainty to the voters on how the money's going to be used.
Your thoughts on this?
Well, I got a lot of thoughts. First of all, again, I commend Councilman Flynn and Strickland for bringing ideas to the table. There are too many people in government today that complain and talk but don't bring solutions to the table. 40% of the children in this city live below poverty. 85% of those live in single-family homes. If we're ever going to be a great city, we've got to be a great city for children and families. I'd probably be more open to support this if the full $47 million went to early childhood, and not just for fourth graders. Most affluent people in this city send their kids at 3 years old, even earlier, to pre-K and JK and senior K, 3 levels of kindergarten. They start to learn Mandarin and Spanish and play music. And we should provide that opportunity for all kids. And it's not just about pre-K. We need to start, I think, trying to come up with ways to lower the out-of-wedlock birth rate here, to strengthen families, to provide home visitation, to help the children that are born into this tough environment, to help those parents be better parents. One of the things I'd like to fund that with, I think we need a BHAG goal here. One of my ideas that we're looking at through the strategic planning process is monetizing city assets. I like the idea of a trust fund. I like the idea of not funding more government, but funding organizations out there that are really moving the needle. Look at our infant mortality rate when people got involved. We are moving the needle on that. If we could do the same around children and family well-being, we could have a great city. Instead of focusing on these kind of gilded projects made of dust that we spend so much time on, we should focus more on that. I think if we looked at monetizing city assets, look at the airport, look at Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, look at our real estate. I think there are ways that we could take those assets, sell them, not use that money to plug one-time budget gaps, but to invest and make a one-time bet on the future of this city and this region.
So you're opposed, you're not opposed, you've made clear, you're not opposed to the early childhood education and funding that, but what specifically about the structure that Councilman Flynn and Strickland have put forward,
sure. So,
what don't you like about that structure?
Hey, listen, I just, as we sit here, I mean, this stuff evolves. I mean, so I'm evolving in my thinking right now, when we talk about early childhood. So my problem with saying and selling it to the community, saying, well, we're going to put it against $20 million against the tax rate. I think before we spend any more money on our fat boy government, we need to reform it.
Okay.
And if you look at, so we can say that, well, we're going to reduce your property tax rate by $20 million. We can say that, but the reality is we already have about a $40 million structural imbalance. So we might be able to get one more year this year. At some point, the chickens are going to come home to roost. If you look at what we did in the budget last year, we used $20 million against a $1 billion liability that past politicians have promised to retirees on health care. We have a $1 billion liability. We put a measly $20 million against it, and we rated that to get by one more budget year. And people think that is a good thing.
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, because this is one of the common misconceptions. We're lowering the property tax rate, but it's not through cutting government or one-time money or anything like that. We're taking one recurring revenue stream and replacing it with another recurring revenue stream, because the reason that the city has a lot of the financial troubles is we're losing population. We're losing population for 3 reasons: crime, education, and property taxes. The sales tax initiative, it helps with education by preparing the children when they hit the schools. That in and of itself will help with the crime. And it helps with the property tax rate, not through
making a more attractive place for people to live, is the theory.
It moves the baseline down. Okay. We'll still have to deal with the structural imbalances.
But how do you deal with those? How do you deal with those structural imbalances if you don't take some of that tax money now and put them to those, or cut spending elsewhere in the city? I guess.
That's what you get to is the structural imbalances that you have to do. But without the sales tax, we're not going to have pre-K. We're going to be dealing with the structural imbalance at a 311 rate as opposed to a 291. It doesn't change any of the choices we have to make. It changes our position when we make them. It improves the position.
Does the rate stay, though, at 311 once we recertify the tax rate? I mean, what does the reappraisal do to your numbers?
That is one of the big issues that we're going to be dealing with in the budget this year. I believe the reappraisal is in. I've been waiting on some documents as to what that amount is. I've been, in all the previous, when we've talked about it, I've been working with about a 5% reduction, which would be a deficit of about $15 million. That we're going to have to make up. We also know
not giving the 4.6 back either for that, right?
No.
The 4.6 is those are the raises.
Yeah, I mean, how long are we going to keep our police pay down? I mean, that's another $20 million right there. Right. So and that happened 2 years ago. So.
But the 4.6%, and I think one of the things that is going to come out of this 5-year strategic plan is, and it's something I'm attuned to because I've been saying it for so long, is this one-size-fits-all philosophy, I think, is one of the things that leads to the structural imbalance. I mean, when you look at the pay scale of our employees, there are going to be some that are underpaid, and there are going to be some that are grossly overpaid. So when you balance it out against the private market, I mean double.
Right.
33,000 versus
the police
50,000.
Grossly underpaid for the job that he has, as an example.
Yeah.
120,000, it's ridiculous.
So even when we're looking at the 4.6%, to look at it as just a blanket number, I think is contributing to that structural imbalance. And part of the 5-year strategic plan should be getting all jobs individually put up instead of just, we're negotiating with everybody.
If I could just say one thing here, I mean, I think that, and maybe it's a timing thing, Councilman Flynn plays chess. I mean, there's no one better out there when you talk about strategy. He's way ahead of most other people. He's not playing checkers. He's playing chess. And so maybe there's some reasons why we do this year. I'd like to see it, to try to make this as businesslike as you can in a political environment, and evaluate this as a part of the strategic planning process, which will be coming out very, very soon, about how we tax, how we spend, where we invest. And I would like the monetization of assets to be a part of how we fund, just not pre-K, but other wraparound services.
And when you say monetization of assets, are you talking about selling? Are we back to that whole
I'm talking
topic
about
of selling
I'm talking about
MLGW?
Memphis Light Gas and Water, selling it, taking that money, putting it in a trust. It would kick off an annuity, and hopefully $100 million per year in perpetuity to invest in this. MLGW, office buildings, real estate, what other cities have done, but what most other cities have done, they've taken that money and they've just kicked the can and plugged their budget gaps. We have a chance to be smart about it. It may not work, but we need to see the analysis, and then I think we can make a good decision on that.
Bill.
Councilman Conrad, has selling Memphis Light Gas and Water become more complex, though, because of the charter changes? Because this was a proposal that Mayor Harrington made.
I think one of the biggest complexities of, frankly, selling Memphis Light Gas and Water is going to be all the unfunded liabilities that have racked up on their balance sheet. If you look at all the things that, through the City Council and MLGW, that's racked up on all the things that they owe pensioners and
It's health benefit. It's really, when we talk about unfunded liabilities, we're talking
pension,
and
and
health
it's
care.
healthcare.
Yeah.
And so that will probably be the biggest roadblock there. But it's not just that. The city has a lot of assets, parking meters. There are a lot of different things that we can look at, and I think that's better. People pay too much taxes. I mean, everybody's tax just went up 2%. We have the highest sales tax rate. We agree our property tax rate is way too high.
Right.
It's one of the things that's driving businesses out of here. And and we already have, and I don't think we should just max out our sales tax. I might be open to do it if we took all that money, invested it in kids in this community. But I think we need to look at other ways to do it as opposed to increasing the tax burden on our population.
I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit into some things that have been going on with funding of big projects. Might be the kind of dust you referenced before, but right now there's an interrelated set of proposals of needing to retrofit Liberty Land, do something with the fairgrounds, the Heritage Trail, the last of the big housing projects, and there's been proposals that are, how we're going to fund that. TDZ zones, all these different acronyms I can come up with. A lot of funding, tax incentive funding that's going to Bass Pro. Where are you on that, Kemp? Is there enough money to go around to incent these big projects that the mayor says and other people say they want to get done?
I don't think there are, and maybe I'm just not visionary enough, but I don't think that is going to make us a city of choice. We've got people that have never had their streets paved in their lifetimes. We used to spend $100 million a year on capital. Now we spend 80. I think people think that if we do these projects, we're going to feel better. It's kind of like Memphis is a beautiful old house and mansion, and it's got so much potential, but the core and the foundation are rotting from the inside. It's eaten up by termites, with poverty, with crime, with all these things we've been talking about. And instead of focusing on that and getting the basics of city government right, we slap on another coat of paint onto the house and think that things are okay.
Your take on that, Shaflin? On these big projects and the funding of them, of tearing down the housing projects, funding, the fairgrounds. Is the city?
I think some of that's different than Heritage Trails. Now,
Okay.
I think some of the Hope 6 stuff that was done is different than now declaring all of downtown a slum so we can, set up this central control, government-oriented development organization. So I just want to make sure we separate.
But are those misplaced priorities? The big projects.
They're not misplaced. It's always a balancing test because Councilman Conrad just used the analogy of a house. Well, I'll also use the analogy of a shark. A city has got to swim or die. You can't stand still because the other cities just aren't doing that also. You have to be able to, pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time to move your city forward. Now, when TIFs are very, very useful things on a case-by-case basis. Okay. And to say TIFs are bad or TDZs are bad, no. You have to look at it. A lot of times it comes down to the scope. How much, how big is the TIF, and that's where these really got a lot of the criticism, is they were so uncharacteristically large.
Yeah.
Right.
And it bears analysis politically. I think the county commission has made their
the Robert Lipscomb, they're going to go back to the drawing board on that. But the idea of tearing down the public housing, I suppose, in theory, you're both in favor of that? And the success of the previous projects?
I think there's been a lot of good done with it. I think like most things, it's a mixed bag. You can point to successes and detriments.
Yeah, I'm open to creative. I try to be as creative as we can in our business. I'm open to TDZs and TIFs, but I think when you look at a TIF, You know, what that does, I mean, you're taking a lot of money that would go back to the general fund and putting it back in a project. Well, we got a problem in city government. We got a $40 million imbalance. So I think, again, before we start doing TIFs and using those, we need to fix this, because we can't be sucking more money away from an already, business. It's $40 million underwater. And on the Liberty line, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm going to move, because we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to move to, you talked about crime, you talked about that being one of the real big problems in the city. Over the last, 5-6 years, the violent crime rate has come down, but there's a lot of concern that the violent crime rate last year was back up. And I think the city council had a lot of questions about Blue Crush. Tell me your take on that. Where are we with the city, the police department, use of Blue Crush, and funding of the police officers?
I'm the chairman of the Public Safety Homeland Security Committee, and we can't thank the Memphis Police Department enough for what they do and what they're doing out there. It's an incredible job. I think the really rub here is, what is Blue Crush? Well, Blue Crush is data-driven, taking data and then deploying resources. I think Director Godwin's vision of that was using those details, overtime details, funding it however, to get people off the street and to lock them up. And I think Director Armstrong has a different vision of Blue Crush. We might call it, Red Crush or whatever, but it's more of this community-oriented policing. It's a different strategy. I've talked to Dr. Janikowski. He says it's based on the best research. So we'll have to see. Time will tell. But right now, the crime rate is up. And I think that's really the rub here. So I think it's a lot more difficult than just how many details. We need to really get into the whole strategy. We're going to be having another hearing in 2 weeks, because there was some conflicting information that Councilman Strickland gave, that the police department gave, and Mayor Wharton and his administration are saying a different thing every day. And one thing we need out of this mayor is we need more quarterback and less cheerleading. He's got to get engaged in the guts and the details of city government.
Your take on that, Chafin? Is Blue Crush being done? Is that why the crime rate's up? That we're not implementing Blue Crush?
When you get to the controversy of it all, and I'm not going to name names because I couldn't authoritatively if I wanted to, but I think if you take a step back from the finger pointing and the blaming and who's responsible for what, it is sort of what Councilman Conrad, there's two schools of thought on this. Councilwoman Barbara Ware, former Councilwoman Barbara Ware, was never a fan of Blue Crush. And she was always asking for more COAC units, more community policing. And there's different theories of it. Now, Blue Crush has tremendous business support. It has tremendous support in this community, but it's not universal support. And there is another side to this story. I happen to believe that Blue Crush had an effect. Now, but there are people that don't. And we need to move past the finger pointing and move on to, let's have that debate of community policing versus Blue Crush. Let's just get on with it.
Bill.
Real quick question, Councilman Flynn. You have been involved in the school discussions, the settlement talks. I don't think you're going to tell us what the solution is, but can you tell us when the solution might be here?
I think, well, no, because there's been no agreement, and it's a fragile thing, and it could fall apart at any time. So I'll guard what I say, but I think everyone that's been a party to the discussions has been pleasantly surprised and optimistic about what's going on in the discussions, and that's because I think we've moved past sort of the gotcha schools debate of one side, it's a zero-sum game. One side has to lose, so the other side has to win. And it's getting more people on the same page for how can we improve education for everyone, not just the kids in the city or not just the kids in the county, but what's best for everyone's individual needs. And we're getting close there.
Are there offers and counter offers being exchanged?
Massive offers, yes, millions of them. But it's been done very politely, without a lot of the rancor that you've seen in the other discussions. And I think that just that change in attitude, where it's if they win, I'm losing, is part of the big change.
Maybe that's rational enough to get rid of the Sunshine Law. You can probably get a lot more done when people aren't doing it all in public.
I won't argue about that at this point. A final point. Has the phrase charter schools been used many times in these discussions?
I will neither confirm nor deny the use of that or any other phrase, other than I think that Chairman Ritz might have called me an ugly name one time.
Let me get you back in, Kim Crowder. Where are we in the budget process? What comes next? What are some of the next steps as we start talking about structural imbalances, changes in the tax rate, and so on? What do you want to see happen over the next
I want to see a more
month?
business-like approach, a data-driven approach, focusing on priorities and then how we resource those, both in the short term and the long term. That's a part of the strategic planning process. It'll be a 5-year budget blueprint. The first year will be this year's budget. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But I tell you, it's been.
We hope.
We hope.
We hope it'll be
it's been 4 years. And one of the things, when we debate these things, Councilman Flynn says, Councilman Conrad's right, but people aren't going to agree to this. So I ate at a Chinese restaurant and I've got my fortune cookie, and my fortune cookie last night said, "You deserve respect, and eventually we'll get it." So I think my ideas on government reform, sooner rather than later, we're going to get respect and get some change.
It's just going to take time. I'm not a prop comic. I seeded that ground at Carrot Top back in the day, but it goes back to those three things: crime, education, and property tax rate. That's why I think the sales tax vote is so important, because it enables us to affect all of those issues. It's not an escape valve. It's not a spackling. It's just a shifting. It puts us in a better position to work on Councilman Conrad's reforms.
And just the quick logistics in 15 seconds of what happens next with the sales tax proposal.
Well, the sales tax proposal still has to go to the city council. We want to get buy-in there so the public will have assurance. I mean, that's the funding body saying this is where the money will go. Then, if they approve it, we'll send a letter to the election commission. The election commission will set up a special.
I can't wait to see that $20 million get spent and hashed in committee that they've put out there for the good.
All right.
Can happen in
We
2
will
weeks.
continue the discussion as the weeks go forward. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.